Start. Okay. All right. All right. And just for anybody that's just coming in, I'm Josh with American Gnome Broadcasting, and we just took a look at some Diablo 4 stuff. In the previous video, you'll be able to find that on YouTube. But I'm going to go do something real quick, and I'll be right back, and then we will jump into that's right, cha. Let me get
the story of
yes. The Korovina group incident. That's what we're getting to next. So I'll be right back. Go ahead and get your something to drink, something to eat, something to smoke on. Get settled, and I shall return in one moment. I am watching the chat log on Twitch, so if you want to say hi, I'm here. I will answer as soon as I return. Grab my coffee. I might have to make some more coffee too. I'm good for now. Use the gnomish helmet for my excursion. All right. And yes, my coffee is getting low. Well, that's not as a good thing for going to watch a documentary and play some video games and do some stuff afterwards. So, I shall return shortly. In seconds. In fact, so to keep you busy and something to do, let's oh, but let's go here. Yes. Music provided by Total Eclipse, royalty-free music. So, yes. And we're gonna go first. Yes. Like Mr. Rogers, when he used to come in, he used to change his jacket and his hat and everything. I miss Mr. Rogers. I'm a little bit older, so I got to make sure I stay regular. Nothing weird like Mucilix or anything like that. Just make sure I get my brand and everything. And Nutrigrain's pretty good. Every once in a while, my mom will give me a box of Nutrigrain bars, and like that's what I munch on for a couple of days after that. Take them to work, eat them while I'm on stream. It's easy. Making coffee. I hope everybody's doing okay. Hope everybody's staying happy and healthy. For some of you, the weekend is fast. Oop. Oh, sweet Jesus! That was okay. All right, it scared me. Thought I hit the record button anyway. The end of the weekend is fast approaching. It is 10 o'clock, 10:12 currently. My new week doesn't start till Wednesday. Or Wednesday through Saturday. It's a good job. I'm happy where I ended up. I've always been a salesman. I remember at 5 not 5, but I remember when I was in elementary school, maybe it was more like probably like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, something like that, where we were doing fundraisers. And I would go around the neighborhood, and my grandmother would go to her job, and my mom would go to her job, and I'd do pretty well. I used to sling Comcast, a local company. They don't exist anymore, but that was a decent job. It's the first time I learned that my temper could probably get me fired, which everybody should learn. It's a useful lesson. So, for context, this lady had been screaming at me for maybe that was the last one. She'd been screaming at me for a while, and I was on the phone with her for a very long amount of time, and at some point I just lost it. I didn't scream at her, but I think I said something fairly rude, or she heard me say something while like I was supposed to have the mute button on. That happened once or twice. I've lost a sale that way in the same job. Another useful lesson. Use the mute button unless you're prepared for the consequences. Kind of why I like doing this, because not necessarily forces me to improve my improv skills, but to be conscious of what I'm saying, especially since I'm live and on camera. This is forever stuff, or at least until I take it down, which is bullshit and fucking coward type shit. So be mindful of the things that you actually say. So it's okay if stupid ass fucking thoughts flow through your brain. It's what we have filters in our brain and our conscience is for, to make sure that is as far as those go. Your conscience and your logic would tell you that idea is really fucking bad. It would probably lead to very difficult consequential endings. So, yeah. And words and the intention that you use those words, it's important. even if you don't mean to hurt somebody, you can really hurt somebody with the things that come out of your mouth. Like you're not even thinking along the lines that they are, but like they interpret it that way. It's like art. It's in the eye of the beholder. You know, someone else's brain is not the same as yours. Like you don't see anything the same way. So let's check out this Korovina group incident.
The story of Korovina hiking group is not unlike that of the famous Dyatlov Pass Incident. Though much more obscure than the tragedy of the Dyatlov group, it is no less strange and perplexing. What exactly happened remains a mystery to this day, surrounded by eerie rumors that range from top-secret state operations to the involvement of mountain spirits. And to make the story even more chilling, it has been recounted by the group's only survivor in cold-blooded detail, a grisly and mysterious tale. So what really happened that day in the mountains of South Siberia?
South Siberia, that sounds so cold.
The year is 1993. A group of students, led by Lyudmila Korovina, head of a hiking club at a vocational school in Petropavlovsk, decide to embark on an ascent of Hamar Daban, a mountain range in the Republic of Buryatia in southern Siberia. The expedition, planned along a route of medium difficulty, is intended to be part of the nationwide sports tourism competition that is taking place that year. Who are the people who joined Korovina? The 23-year-old Alexander Krysin was a student at the Bauman Technical University in Moscow. He joined Lyudmila's club at the age of 12 and had dreamt of the mountains ever since. That fateful summer of 1993, he headed for Hamar Daban right after passing his university exams. The 19-year-old Denis Shvachkin ended up in Korovina's group almost by accident. He was also a member of Lyudmila's club and knew her well, but only joined the trekking group after another member was banned from going by his parents. Denis's own parents were away on vacation at the time, and he left them the following note before going. Off to the mountains, we'll be back soon. Timur Bapanov grew up in the mountains. The parents of the 15-year-old loved sports tourism and passed their passion on to their son. Tatiana Filipenko had a secretarial job at the school that housed Korovina's hiking club. The 24-year-old loved the mountains, had previously joined Korovina for several easier hikes, and was excitedly looking forward to the ascent of Hamar Daban. Like Denis, Victoria Zelisova wasn't part of the initial group. She had previously had difficulty managing a winter hike, which was why Korovina didn't want to take her with them. However, Victoria was adamant about going to Hamar Daban and asked her mother to call Korovina and persuade her to let the 16-year-old join the group. Valentina Yutachenko, having grown up in the village and being used to the hardest and dirtiest work, displayed notable physical and mental strength. The 16-year-old had gone on hikes before and was hoping to experience the romance of the Hamar Daban range. Both Korovina and her team were skilled trekkers. Lyudmila had already led hikes on the Tian Shan, the Urals, and the Altai mountains. Preparations for the ascent of Hamar Daban started 6 months in advance. Every detail of the route, every hour of the hike was elaborated. Everybody in the group loved mountain hiking and readily tested their strength. However, one thing worried the youngsters' parents and Korovina's colleagues. Every time they returned from their hikes severely exhausted. The students themselves weren't bothered by that in the least. They said that it was only normal to feel exhausted after hikes, and that the satisfaction of having completed the ascent was worth the adversities of the climb itself. Nonetheless, some grown-ups were horrified that the students were absolutely drained upon returning home and believed Korovina exposed them to overly hard conditions. Some assumed that she strictly limited the amount of food and personal belongings that the group was allowed to take. Then again, the same would be true of any trekking group leader. Experienced hikers understand that one must always carefully consider the weight of what one packs for an expedition, because a few ounces here and a few ounces there can quickly turn into several extra pounds that one will have to haul around in addition to everything else. On average, a hiker's backpack should weigh around 22 to 26 pounds. Though naturally it depends on how long and how difficult the ascent is considered to be. Seeing as Korovina's team included teenagers as well as young adults in their 20s, food and gear was distributed among backpacks based on the weight of their owners, which was why everybody was concerned with minimizing the total weight of their bags. Both the group members and their parents had said multiple times that they trusted Korovina's expertise and that the hikers always packed enough food to get them through the journey. Lyudmila Korovina was the head of the Azimut Hikers Club at a vocational school in Petropavlovsk, in modern-day Kazakhstan. In 1993, she was 41 years old and one of the best-known trekking group leaders in the city. Here's how Yevgeny Alhovsky, one of the members of her club, remembers her. She knew how to unite people and create a team. She believed people and believed in them. She was able to bring out the best in people. Under her guidance, each of us could develop our abilities to the best and improve our character in all areas of life. Thanks to her, many people became great teachers and athletes, built families, learned to draw and play the guitar, became stronger and braver and better. We were all like foster children to her, and she cared about all of us. When boys went to the army, she would see them off and then pick them up once they had finished military service. Korovina was a professional hiker of international level. She had previously participated in expeditions through the Western Tian-Shan, Northern and Circumpolar Urals, the Western Sayan, the ranges of mountains Shoria and Altai, and the Karakum Desert. The ill-fated hike of 1993 was also not the first time Korovina had gone to Hamar Daban. Lyudmila had a daughter, Natalia, whom she raised by herself. In 1993, she was 16 years old. That fateful August, Natalia also went on a hike with another group that was supposed to meet Lyudmila's team during the expedition. So which itinerary did Korovina's team choose? Their route began at Murino, a small settlement in the Irkutsk region on the border to Buryatia, went through the Langutaisky Pass and onto a ridge leading to summit of Han Yula, then gradually descended to the Snezhnaya River along Lake Batavoye, though the village of Utilik and Lake Chortova Pass, ending at the city of Sludyanka. In total, the group had to cover 130 to 140 miles. To make things worse, the summer months that year were especially rainy. According to meteorologists, June and August saw the worst weather in the region in 30 years. The mountains of Hamar Daban are not very big. Their highest point, peaking at 7,778 feet, is Mount Han Yula, which translates to Mountain of the King. The summit of Sahor is somewhat lower with 7,600 feet, and the Chersky Peak comes in third at 6,856 feet. Such altitudes are not considered dangerous, since the human body can usually adapt relatively well to mildly decreased oxygen levels, though there have been cases of altitude sickness setting in at around 6,500 feet. Early symptoms of the sickness include deteriorating vision, decreased light sensitivity, and reduced spatial perception. The difficulty level of hiking routes, however, is not measured solely by the altitude of the hiking area, but must necessarily include how challenging the climb itself is, for which there is a special classification. Korovina and her group were planning to take a level 3 route. This is a route of medium difficulty that beginners will be warned against. But Hamar-Daban features other trails that are more challenging. Even such relatively low mountains can sometimes be treacherous. Most of the Hamar-Daban Ridge lies in the Republic of Buryatia, a land of several religions, most notably shamanism. Shamans believe that Hamar-Daban is a place of mysterious force, and many locals, as well as trekkers, agree with them. Before starting their ascent of Hamar-Daban, hikers often wish to learn what rituals they must perform to ensure that the mountains stay benevolent. With nature being as unpredictable as it is, it's only normal for people to look for support and protection, and in doing so, to the spiritual realm. Perhaps it is indeed necessary to appease local spirits before starting a hike. For instance, anyone willing to climb Mount Everest with Sherpas must take in a rite of passage known as the puja ceremony to pay respect to the mountain and
Tradition
ensure
is important.
a safe journey. So we've established that shamans believe the Hamar-Daban mountains to be mystical, even forbidding anyone but themselves to visit certain areas of the ridge where they perform shamanic rituals and reach a state of trance. Travelers on Hamar-Daban often report being overwhelmed by inexplicable sensations, from fear and anxiety to despair and complete apathy. Some hear an incessant rumble that sounds as if it is coming from nowhere, while others claim hearing cryptic creaking and squeaking. Some encounter uncanny landscapes and oddly behaving animals. It was into these strange parts that the team of Ludmila Korovina was headed. 3 young men and 3 young women, led by their beloved teacher, start their hike on the 2nd of August from Murino Station. They take a commemorative photograph before finally setting off into the mountains. In the first days of their hike, they go through the Lengutaisky Pass, reach the crest of Hamar-Daban, and head to the summit of Hanyula. They're out of luck with the weather. Though it is the height of summer, there is heavy rain and snow, exacerbated by strong winds. The team isn't prepared for such conditions. The forecast was quite different when they were planning the hike. In addition to the downpour, the hikers have to endure an impenetrable fog. Later on, another tracking group will describe it as sticky. No one can give a proper definition of what sticky fog is. Seems that it can only be experienced, but not described. That summer, the locals had noted oddly behaving animals, deer that weren't afraid of people. They wouldn't run away, but would simply freeze up and stare.
No.
Bears would reach railroad tracks and throw themselves under trains. Some also said that something strange had happened to the trees of Hamar-Daban. In some places, it seemed as if a mysterious force had pressed them against the slopes. Only by cutting one's way with an axe could one get through such a forest. It is in such conditions that the team makes their way along the ridge. Only one day happens to be sunny. It is then that they make camp at the Lengutaisky Pass for a day of rest, continuing their hike the next morning. As they move along the crest of the ridge, the weather gets worse again. On the 4th of August, the team reaches the summit of Hanyula and sets up an overnight camp. Here, the land is barren and windy, with nothing but rocks and grass, and the bad weather complicates their overnight stay even further. The plan is to climb another lower mountain and then descend to the Snezhnaya River, where a second hiking group, which included Korovina's daughter Natalia, would be waiting for them. Together, they plan to reach the city of Sludanka via Lake Petavoye and Chortova Lake Pass. Korovina's team, however, did not reach the meeting place on the agreed-upon date. Natalia later said that her group decided to wait till the next day, but Korovina's team didn't show up the next day either. So the group continued their journey alone. Natalia only learned the terrible news at the end of their hike. She found out that one of Korovina's team members, Valentina Yutachenko, was picked up by Ukrainian hikers on the banks of the Snezhna River. The young woman was in a state of shock and hardly spoke, being able only to explain that her whole group had died on the 5th day of their hike. Telegrams were immediately sent out to the relatives of the deceased, and questions about what happened started to accumulate. While rescuers were looking for the remains of the group, an official investigation was launched into their death. During the pre-investigation probe, Valentina Yutachenko was asked to write an explanatory note in which she was to describe what happened. Her note went as follows.
On the 4th of August, we reached the Krutoy Pass. We went down and hiked through a treeless alpine zone. We would cook our food on a camp stove. At around 4 p.m., we were moving towards Peak Tritrans, but it was cold and there was heavy rain, so we stopped at a treeless area and set up 2 tents. At 4 a.m., our guy ropes tore, so we changed them. At 6 a.m., one of the tent poles was torn from the ground. Sleeping bags got wet. August 5th, 10 a.m. Kristen came and said they were soaking wet and freezing. It was snowing, no landmarks were visible. We collected our backpacks and began to go. After about 10 meters, Kristen fell. Others tried to help him, but he kept falling. Korovina remained beside him and told the others to go down, but then stopped us almost immediately and asked someone to return to her. Tanya took out a tent and the others took cover while I went up to Korovina. Kristen's eyes were huge and indifferent. Korovina took his pulse and said his heart had stopped beating. She asked me to help Vika down, so I went up to her, but she beat me. I dragged her back to the rest. Tatiana began banging her head on the rocks. Dennis hid behind them and climbed into his sleeping bag. I crawled up to Korovina, but she wasn't breathing. Then I tried getting Timur up. When I realized that no one was moving, I went down to where there were trees. I got dressed and got into my sleeping bag, covered myself with a tent. In the morning, I went up and saw Tanya, Dennis, Timur, and Vika. Above them were Sasha and Korovina. None of them rose again.
In her note, Valentina also recounted how she survived in the mountains alone for 3 days and how she was finally rescued. She said that morning after the incident, she went back to the deceased team and closed their eyes. Many reporters were fascinated and terrified by her miraculous escape and the fact that she not only spent the night right next to the team's place of death, but was also able to return there. No less astonishing is the fact that she managed to survive in the wilderness for days and finally reached the river. She said she had stumbled upon an abandoned transmission tower and followed the power masts, reaching first a deserted village and then the riverbank, at which point she no longer had the strength to go further. Soon, she was noticed by hikers from Kiev, who picked her up, gave her soothing medicine and antibiotics because of her severe hypothermia. Together, they reached the city of Sludanka. That's when the search for the rest of the team began. Their bodies were found only a month later, in early September. The ill-fated slope was a horrifying sight, rescuers later recalled. Almost all the victims were dressed in thin trousers. 3 lay barefoot. After a month in the open air, in an area with a lot of animals, the bodies were horribly disfigured. It was difficult for the rescuers to be in the helicopter that took the bodies to Ulan-Ude, the capital of Buryatia, where an autopsy was performed. It showed that all 6 died from hypothermia. At least that's the official story. But it seems rather questionable, especially given Valentina's recollections. Could it have been merely hypothermia when the group had, for no apparent reason, fallen into madness? 5 years after the tragedy, Vladimir Zharov, a well-known Burat journalist and experienced traveler, decided to take a hike along that route. Here's what he had to say. A lot of things were unclear in this incident, so I decided to take the same route the team from Kazakhstan had taken to figure out what could have happened to them. I walked along the Langutai River through the Langutaisky Pass and reached the peak of Tritrans, on the slope of which the group had died. With regards to possible reasons for the group's death, Zharov said, we're dealing with a whole chain of tragic circumstances here. Most importantly, bad weather. August of 1993 was very rainy. Later on, Kazakh athletes visited the group's place of death, and at first they couldn't believe it. It's the height of summer, over 80 degrees outside, and around here, there's people freezing to death. However, this is most likely what happened. Imagine cold rain pouring down day and night, clothes and tents wet. Lighting a fire on Hamar Daban is difficult, even in normal weather, because everything is damp, and here it was raining for days on end. Naturally, by the 5th of August, the team was exhausted and cold. It turned out later that an area where one could safely spend the night and even light a fire was only 30-minute hike away from the place where Korovina's group decided to make camp. Why hadn't they gone up there?
I'll make some in a little bit.
Perhaps the maps were not accurate enough, and the exhausted trekkers decided not to use whatever strength they had left on searching for the exact location. Maybe Korovina was unable to navigate properly as twilight descended. Or perhaps she simply felt sorry for her exhausted students and decided to give them some more rest before reaching the summit. In the morning, Korovina most likely noticed that snow had fallen, and being an experienced hiker, knew how dangerous it would be for the tired and freezing trekkers, which was why she told them to pack their things immediately and climb down to where there were trees. The hikers rolled up their tents, gathered their things, and started the descent. And then when tragedy hit. Alexander Krysin suddenly fell and died a strange and horrifying death, frothing at the mouth and bleeding. The 23-year-old Alexander was the strongest of the whole group, the team's backbone. One can hardly imagine what Korovina must have felt seeing the young man die right before her eyes. Everyone saw it, but no one could explain it, what to do next. Korovina stayed with Krysin and told the rest to continue their descent. No one knows exactly how things progressed afterwards. Valentina had said she saw the bodies in 2 different places, but later on, the remains of the group were found all on the same spot. They must have continued their descent, but then gone back up. What could have made them return? Yutachenko, the only survivor, moved to another city almost immediately after the incident, starting a new life. For over 20 years, she was silent about the tragedy, and even her own husband didn't know what she had lived through. Doctors had helped her cope with the harrowing experience. After the tragedy, she spent a long time in the hospital. After many years, however, a journalist from the Russian newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda managed to contact Valentina for an interview. Here is the conversation they had.
How many times a day did you eat? 4 times a day at least. Hot food was a must. We would make a fire and cook food. In addition, we would snack during rest stops. We had grains, powdered milk, crackers, canned meat, carrots, beets, onions, sweets, chocolate. I believe our food supply was based on a daily goal of 2,400 kilocalories per person. It was said that you hiked through woodless areas and therefore used camp stoves, and they say you can't cook much on those. I don't remember camp stoves. We went down into the forest and made fires. This was my third hike with Ludmila Korovina. At first, we hiked through the area around Petropavlovsk. Then, we went to Tianshan. Ludmila Ivanovna taught us art, technical drawing, and PE. I was studying to become an arts and crafts teacher and a school hiking instructor, which was why I ended up in Korovina's club. Some say Korovina is to blame for the death of the group. No way. It was early in the morning. We were asleep. It was very cold. Korovina woke us up, told us to pick our things and go down to the gorge. She was trying to save us, but it was too late. The wind was so strong that we had to crawl down instead of walking. Suddenly, Sasha fell and started frothing at the mouth. Korovina sat down next to him, hugged him, and that was it. She never got up again. Then everyone went mad. I don't know how long it lasted. It was like a horror movie. Everyone falling, bleeding, and foaming at the mouth. Blood flowing from the nose. How did you escape? Denis Shvachkin saved me. He kicked me and said, "Crawl down." I went down, but he didn't make it. I climbed into my sleeping bag and fell asleep. Or not so much asleep as unconscious. I don't know. I woke up in the morning, went back up, hoping that someone is alive. No, I saw that they all died. I went up to take a map and a compass. I also closed everyone's eyes. I don't know how I got out to the Snezhny River. I remember seeing power line poles and walking along them. Seems I hadn't gone completely mad, and it was as if someone was leading me all this time. Who was it? There were some strange rumors that it was intelligence agents. It was my guardian angel. I survived with God's help. And how long did you walk? They died on August 5th. And on the 9th of August, I was picked up by hikers. So 4 days. I remember standing on the riverbank and seeing catamarans sailing along the river. The tourist Pyknitsky who picked you up told me that you washed yourself and your clothes in the river. I don't know. Maybe I was behaving really weird there, but I only remember washing myself much later, when we were going down the river together. I remember how they were surprised to see me so deep inside the taiga. They moored and began to ask questions. I was hysterical. They had to give me calming drugs. Later, I remember making flatbread for them on the lid of a cooking pot. Water, flour, salt. What do you think they died of? Pulmonary edema, I think. The symptoms fit: foaming, bleeding from the mouth, insanity. What happened when you returned home? The hikers took me to Petropavlovsk. I didn't tell my parents anything, though they did see how morose I was. And then someone congratulated them on my birthday, and they asked me whether I had anything to tell them. At that point, I couldn't stay silent anymore, and I told them everything. Immediately afterwards, my body gave out, and I had to spend a month or two in a hospital. For a long time, I could hardly eat anything. I had no appetite, but finally, I recovered.
After giving that interview, Valentina participated in a popular Russian TV show together with Korovina's daughter Natalia and Yuri Golyas, a rescuer who was in charge of the search mission. Several theories of what had happened on Hamar Daban were discussed, and it was during this show that it turned out that Korovina's daughter was paid hush money, and a lot of it.
Oh.
Shortly after the tragedy, she was summoned to some office and told not to ask any questions and not to investigate the death of Korovina's group. They offered a lot of money, and she took it. Natalia claims that she wasn't even allowed to see her mother's body. She wasn't permitted to be present at the corpse identification, and all members
That
of the
is
group
strange
were
as
buried
fuck.
in closed caskets. At first, Natalia thought it was because she was only a child at that time. But then it turned out that none of her relatives had seen Ludmila's body. Now let's discuss possible theories. Here's the official story. Due to a sharp change in the weather, the hikers had to leave their tents, dying of hypothermia shortly after, just like in the Dyatlov Pass Incident. During the autopsy, Bureau forensic experts established that all the hikers had died from hypothermia. This is how Konstantin Yugov, head of the Bureau of Forensic Medicine in Buryatia, describes it. We received 6 hikers' bodies for autopsy. Our task was to determine their cause of death. Could it have been hypothermia? Could they have been poisoned? Are there any injuries on the bodies? Firstly, we carefully studied the conditions under which this tragedy occurred in order to determine what could have killed the trekkers. The whole thing happened high in the mountains, with low temperatures and heavy rain. Plus, the hikers were exerting themselves physically and were deprived of oxygen. In such conditions, death can occur quickly. There have been cases when, under similar circumstances, people died of hypothermia within 2 hours. The autopsy revealed signs of hypothermia, such as a lack of nutrients in the muscles, which is why that was the diagnosis given. Furthermore, experts found pulmonary edema and changes in the heart, liver, and lungs that were typical of dysproteinosis, which can be a sign of starvation. But why would they be starving if they had packed 2,400 calories worth of daily food for each person? Rescuers found food in their backpacks, so why didn't the hikers eat during their last rest stop? This is where the official theory finds its culprit, Korovina herself. She was now blamed for the tragedy, having allegedly forced her team to withstand impossible challenges, bringing them to exhaustion and starvation. But even after the tragedy, the students' parents claimed that they were confident of Korovina's skills and completely trusted her. None of them believed that she could be to blame for the death of the group. Another theory claims possible interference from the government. Could it have been that a secret weapon was being tested in the area? What was the sticky fog that hikers described encountering? Once again,
it
you can see similarities with the Dyatlov Pass Incident, where hikers had fled half-cloaked from their tents, having cut them from the inside, obviously frightened by something. Could the same have happened on Hamar Daban, with the group leaving their tents half-dressed and falling into madness?
It sounds very similar
Dennis
to
began
Dyatlov.
to hide behind the rocks and tried to run away. Tatiana banged her head against the rocks. Victoria and Timur seemed to have gone mad. Ludmila Ivanovna died of a heart attack. These were the words of Valentina Yutachenko as recorded in the rescuers' report. What could have made them bang their heads against the rocks and even bite a teammate? One cannot help but recall that Korovina's
there
daughter,
probably could have been some
Natalia,
phenomena going
was
on.
amply remunerated for her silence, and that Valentina herself didn't say a word about the incident for 20 years. Another version of what happened speculates that the team's death may have been caused by naturally occurring toxic gases or poisonous plants. According to data from weather stations, up to 800 earthquakes are recorded annually in the area of Hamar Daban.
Maybe that wasn't fog, maybe that
travelers
was
have reported natural gases escaping from the cracks caused by earthquakes. Natalia believes that it was a gas that played a crucial role in the group's death.
And that's why they were telling them to go down.
She implied that it was some sort of man-made gas of unclear origin.
They said crawl down because the lower you are to the ground, the fresher the air is.
We know that the members of Korovina's group had been collecting a plant known as roseroot. Here's how rescuer Yuri Golias tells the story. Specialists of our control and rescue service helped climbers, hikers, and ski tourists, all organized hiking groups with a route sheet and a route book, were registered in the Committee for Civil Defense and Emergencies, including the group of Ludmila Korovina, who led a team of students from Kazakhstan. I was in the rural area of Kairan when I was informed that river tourists had brought to Sludanka a girl from a group that got lost in the mountains. I met with Valentina Yutachenko. She was in a state of shock. Nevertheless, I asked her to write an explanatory note. According to her, before the onset of that fateful night, the group had spent the day gathering and drying rosewood in the pass. The whole day there was cold rain with snow and a strong wind blowing. The tourists were exhausted, cold, and hungry. Rosewood, or Rhodiola rosea, is known for its nearly miraculous properties. It can increase stamina, build the body's resistance to stress and fatigue, and is commonly used to treat asthenic and neurasthenic conditions, as well as to relieve symptoms of angioneurosis. Could Korovina's group have taken too much of it, or maybe they mistook another herb for it? Valentina Yutachenko claimed that they only used small quantities of rosewood, having some with tea during lunch. However, a whole bag of rosewood was later found in Korovina's backpack. Some believe that she may have been planning to sell it in the city upon returning. Rosewood became the source for another theory, that the group was punished by forest spirits for taking too much of it and having foul intentions. Tradition has it that spirits, or even the mountains themselves, punish anyone who gathers rosewood in excess. Spirits or not, it is true that nature sometimes displays inexplicable phenomena. It seems unlikely that we will ever solve the mystery of the trekker's death, not only because it's so complex, but because there are details that we will probably never find out. I myself don't have a favorite theory, but as always, I have attempted to compile the most interesting information from different sources. Please write in the comments which theory you think is the most plausible.
Archie's Archive, give him a follow or a like and subscribe, whatever. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. All right. Next up is Atomic Heart. I am going to, let's see. I'm going to cut this one here. I'm going to go make some coffee for my cousin because he's trying to quit energy drinks. Like I said before, I'm trying to make an effort to make more consumable bits of content for YouTube. So I'm going to cut this one on this recording.